morning.
Morning. Hey, Rick, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I just want to make sure my microphone's working. Thank you.
Great. It's always the question.
Yep.
Morning, testing my sound. Can everyone hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Great, and I can hear you. Perfect.
Good morning, everybody. We're just waiting for one more committee member, so we have quorum. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Ohio City Design Review Committee meeting for September 21st. I am going to go through our administrative items first. For virtual meeting regulations and procedures, the meeting shall be conducted to Robert's Rules of Order. Actions during the meeting will be taken by voice vote using roll call. Recusal to a conflict of interest should be stated for the record prior to the start of any presentation. The committee member will then leave the meeting for the duration of the case discussion. We do not accept presentation submissions after the deadlines. The chair will call the meeting to order and ask for a roll call of the committee. The administrator will introduce the first project and provide some background information if applicable. The meeting will then be turned over to the applicant to proceed through their presentation. And a reminder to our applicants, I control your presentation, so please tell me when you would like to advance each slide. Each presentation should be completed prior to questions and comments from the committee. Once the presentation has concluded, the administrator will read any received comments. The committee will then begin deliberations and project review. To help facilitate smooth transitions, please use the raise hand feature. After deliberations and review concludes, the committee will render its recommendation and vote. After the vote, the applicant may leave the meeting and the administrator will introduce the next product. All projects will follow the same format until all projects are heard by the committee. Once all projects are heard, the chair will call for any committee or administrator reports. After all reports have been heard, the chair will adjourn the meeting. Community comments. Any and all community members may provide their written comments, thoughts, or questions regarding the projects presented to the committee for review and approval. Community members may also telephone their comments or questions to the committee administrator. All these comments, thoughts, or questions must be submitted to the administrator no later than 48 hours before the start of the meeting, which can be made by email, phone, or by dropping them off here at our office. Public comment or submissions made after the deadline will not be heard by the committee. Public comment will be collected by Landmark staff and sent to the committee members for review prior to the scheduled meeting. Staff will summarize the received comments. The applicant of the project is under no obligation to answer any community questions. Community members are invited to attend the design review meetings, but there will be no open public comment period. All projects follow the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. All projects are being considered for the issuance of a certificate of appropriateness. All projects are considered on a case-by-case basis. The Ohio City Design Review Committee is advisory to the Cleveland Landmarks Commission. Recommendations by this committee are not final actions. Depending on the scope of the projects, submissions may be approved administratively or will need to be reviewed by the Cleveland Landmarks Commission. Projects will be scheduled at the next available commission meeting after an action is taken. And that does that for our administrative review. Doug, are you here? Mr. Frondorf, would you like to take over as chair for this meeting at this time?
Would you like to call the roll?
Calling the meeting to order first.
Calling the September 21st, 2023 Ohio City Design Review Committee meeting to order. Carl, please call the roll.
Mr. Frondorf?
Here.
Ms. Flaherty?
Here.
Ms. Land?
Here.
Mr. Lozier? Ms. Marinucci?
Here.
Mr. Persons?
Here.
Mr. Talley?
Here.
Mr. Wall? Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Carl. You can call the first item.
Hello, am
The
I,
first
am I
item-
on?
Oop, hang on just a second.
Okay. You're gonna make a, yeah.
Okay, our first item is OC 23-47 at 2805 Bridge Avenue for front porch railings and a rear porch addition. Is there Hawksley here?
Yep, I am.
All right, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you all for your time. What we are proposing to do, my client would like to add convert an existing attic in this two unit historic building on Bridge. We studied doing a addition on the back of a freestanding stair, and under consideration, we came to the point where we thought it would be best just to extend the current stair that's interior to existing two-story porch on the rear. See the location. Carl, if you can go to the next page. The basic concept is to make a small, the drawing on the left, you can see the proposed apartment. The idea is to bring the stair up inside of the existing porch and then add a small roof over the existing, I guess you want to call it a terrace porch. The owner of the building or someone, I'm not even clear who did it, but there's actually already a porch roof, a walkable roof on top of the existing porch. Anyway, so you can see in this plan how they propose to make a one-bedroom apartment in this pretty generous attic. It complies head height and dimension-wise with the 1, 2, and 3 building code. I have met with the building department. We will need to do a 2-hour separation between the second floor apartment and this new apartment, or go to the Board of Building Appeals for a variance. Carl, if you go to the next page, please. This basically shows the view from the rear porch at this point, showing the 2-story, and then what I am proposing for an addition on the back. We would essentially create a railing using a more modern railing system. And then we're showing it to be enclosed and also putting a beam in so you could actually lift some furniture up to this apartment. would not be room in the new stair to be able to do that. And I went a little fast. Carl, if you could go back to, I'm sorry, you go to the next page. I'm sorry. The other element that we're proposing, he would like to, or they would like to install a railing on the roof of the front porch. Their proposal is to use a baluster that matches the balusters that were put on at some point on the lower level of the porch. I do not know what the original was, and following the Secretary of Interior standards, I suggested to him that we could potentially use that same baluster that was installed at some point. To me, it's pretty clear, pretty evident that what is there on the lower level was probably not what was there originally. It was retrofit sometime in the past several decades. But obviously, according to the standards, we do not want to guess, and anything we do new should be clearly not historical. So that's what we're asking for your advice and direction on.
Comments from the committee? All right, well, I'll go first then. I think do the easiest thing first. I think what you're proposing for the back of the building is fine. My main issue, though, is adding the porch to the front of the building on the second story there. I don't think that would have been appropriate for that building, unless you can provide some historic evidence that at one point it was a two-story porch. Looking at that building and its age, I don't think that would be the case. And for that reason, I don't think adding a second story porch on the front would be appropriate.
Can I respond? Sure. All we know, there is some evidence in the photograph that there was a railing of some kind, and they are not necessarily proposing that it would. Well, I shouldn't say that. There is evidence that there was a railing at some point. Whether it was a porch, I really can't say. So, but I understand your concern for sure.
Thank you. Other comments?
I don't mind the third floor in the rear. I think it actually looks kind of nice, seems kind of pleasant. And I'd be concerned about, the cost of the 2-hour separation between the second floor unit and the unit above. But also, I don't know if that back wall requires a separation between the wall and the stair. Now that it's 3 units. So I would maybe take that into account. And with the balcony in the front, I guess my first thought is I wonder if those balusters are high enough or tall enough. I don't know if that's 36 inches or if that's 42. I would be concerned about like the height of anything historic. I mean, if there's proof that it was a balcony before, that seems great. Like I said, I would just be concerned that you are getting the correct height. And that, 42 inches doesn't look too tall. So just something to look into. But I think the rear is kind of pleasant.
Yeah, the intention would be that the balusters that have a top and bottom rail that would bring it up to 36 for residential standard. And for sure, the 2 hours up, we did talk about the wall separation as well. And they advised that we would probably go to the Board of Building Appeals, and they thought that pretty likely they would approve it based on the fact that it does provide a stair as an exit as opposed to just an egress window. So.
Gotcha. Okay.
Rick, can you clarify, is there already a third unit up there, or is this the creation of a third unit?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, please?
Can you clarify, is it already a third unit up there, or is this
No, there is not, right.
creation?
There is some mechanical
Have
equipment
you,
that serves the second floor, but there is not currently a unit, no.
has it gotten zoning approval to go to a 3-unit from a 2-family?
There has not. That will be the next thing we have to do.
Okay, so you'll have the zoning, and then you'll have Board of Building standards potentially.
Yes.
Okay, I'm also okay with the third or the rear proposal here. I don't have any comments there. That's fine by me. I do have a couple more kind of clarifications needed for this front porch unit. I just think we just are lacking a little bit of detail at this point. I would want to see what kind of posts are being proposed, attachment kind of method, how that's going, like, are there going to be newels or posts, partial height columns? Like, what's the attachment mechanism in terms of running this rail? What's the materiality of the top and the bottom rail? Is the current roof flat, or is this going to be just decorative?
The part, which roof are you talking about?
The front one.
The front one, my
This porch
understanding is
roof.
it's a slightly pitched roof now. My understanding would be is that it would remain as it is.
Is
But
the
you're right.
structural member?
Yeah.
Are the structural members sized appropriately to be occupiable?
It's a good question. My assumption they are because there was a railing there originally, but based on the age of the building, the railing could have been decorative as well. So
Yeah. So I think I would just want a little bit more detail in terms of what we're looking at for the actual components of the railing, and how those are aligned with the columns below. And then possibly some clarification on if this is meant to be occupied, and if so, is it structurally capable of handling that?
okay, no problem.
Okay. And I agree with Philip on the height. I think historically speaking, it would probably have been a much lower railing, but from a safety standpoint, it probably needs to be taller. So yeah, if we could just, again, back of house, great. No concerns for me there, but the front, I think we just need more.
Sounds great. Okay.
I think if I could weigh in as well on the front porch, being that it will be a walking surface or a surface that somebody's going to be occupying, the roof shingles being that occupied surface on a slope, just clarifying what the intent is to reconcile a sloped roof with what's going to be kind of a rooftop patio condition. If there's going to be a railing out here, kind of how you're going to treat that would be helpful.
All righty.
I'm in agreement with Alex. I don't think that the full width front porch at the second story is appropriate historically. I'm sure this house probably started out as a single family and then got, changed over the years. And that's how that door and the railing would have ended up maybe in, being instated later. So if anything, I guess I would be more inclined to see if there has to be for egress or safety reasons, a railing up in front of that door. I'd be more inclined to see something that was closer to a Juliet balcony that just was near that opening rather than all the way across the entire front of the house. But I do like your idea of using the historic height rail, but then, for the spindle and then building it up with the rail. I think that always looks nice.
I believe that this was very much built based on all the evidence I saw, that it was built as a 2-family. It's a quite remarkable house, and a lot of the detail is pretty amazing. So.
All right, I think at this, unless there are any, does anyone have any other comments? Would anyone like to make a motion? And if, I think Margaret, my position is clear. For those of you in the alternative position, if you would like to see more details, if you want it tabled, you'd have to ask the applicant for that.
Carl, are we able to split into an approval for the back and then a table for the front?
That's, I think, what I was going to recommend, because it seems that the rear doesn't seem to be an issue at this
Yeah.
point. They would just need variances from building code for everything, but you've asked for quite a bit more detail on the front, and perhaps they can get some more evidence as to whether that was a second floor porch as well. There are concerns about whether it'd be able to hold weight and such as well. So I think that would be appropriate.
Okay, so motion to approve the rear modifications to the property and to table the front porch modifications based on our feedback for more information if the applicant agrees to that.
Sounds great.
Second.
Call the roll.
Ready?
Yes.
Lynn,
Yes.
Marinucci,
Yes.
Mr. Persons,
Yes.
Mr. Talley,
Yes.
Mr. Frondorf. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you all for your time and your insight.
Our next item is case OC 23-48, 3405 Clinton Avenue, home renovations. Mr. McCarthy?
Carl, just for the record, I will recuse on this and I will stop my video.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So you can go to the next slide, I'm sure. I'm asking for colors as well as some siding for the gables of this house. So this is the extended porch that was redone, as well as the trim on the new windows that were put in. The next slide of the side of the house as well. So I'm looking for adding to the existing gables vinyl siding, cedar shake looking siding. There's vinyl siding existing on the home, which will stay. So that's number one. I've got some colors on the next slide. There's the gable, the front gable. That last picture was the side gable of the third floor, as well as the trim that's in place now. So Roycroft pewter for the trim on all the windows. I got this color from actually Jessica Beam, who's on this. And then the next slide color would be for the gable, Cape Cod gray. And you can see it on the right-hand side there. But as you can see, the traditional shake on the bottom left, which is what I'm proposing, it's vinyl cedar shake. And then there's a small gable on the porch, which is wood, and that would be color matched to match the gables on the front as well as the side. The Roycroft pewter would be on the porch, obviously repainting all of the porch one color, some detail with the Cape Cod gray as well. And then obviously just open any suggestions for the skirting or the apron underneath for colors. I think underneath that's the existing, but I think right now we could put some trim around the sides to make it look a little bit more complete. Or we can obviously remove that and put regular lattice underneath and color that whatever color you guys, maybe suggest. So just open to the under porch suggestions on top of the gable siding and the colors. So I'm not sure if there's another, I don't think there's any other slides.
No, that's the last one.
Okay.
I can say the colors are fine. I think that's historically appropriate and attractive. I would definitely recommend changing the porch skirting to more traditional lattice. I think it's better for the health of the porch.
Yep.
And then a more appropriate look. I, for one, cannot support or approve the vinyl shake. I'd prefer to see cedar, actual wood shake. The nice thing is about new shake, you could stain instead of paint it, and the stain would give you an extended life where you don't have to be painting as frequently. So that would be my suggestion.
Before we move on, we have Dan left us some comments. He could not be with us here today, so Jessica's going to read those to the committee. Thank you.
Carl. Yes, so these are comments from Dan as he wasn't able to be here today. Landmark staff administratively approved the replacement of the windows with aluminum clad windows on the front, sides, and rear. This summer, Landmarks received complaints about the windows being installed were not the appropriate size, and upon review, it appeared that the replacement windows were the appropriate size, but the replacement trim, which was unpainted at the time, accentuated the replacements. Dimensions of the third floor front gable windows appeared to have been altered from the original windows. Staff worked with the owner to adjust the placement of the third floor windows and trim to bring it closer to the original configuration and appearance. During the discussion with staff, changes to the porch were discussed, as well as the owner's desire to add vinyl scallop siding to the third floor gable. Staff requested that the owner not only present the proposed vinyl gable siding to the design review committee, but also present the porch alterations for retroactive review. Staff feels that the proposed porch replacement and opening is appropriate, but the detailing with the skirting and the railings needs refinement. The window replacements have been resolved to a reasonable resolution. As a note, there's also a pending permit application for fireproofing the side of the garage, which should not cause any visible change to the property and will be handled administratively.
Any other committee members with comments?
So can I ask a clarifying question? The upper gable, which is in the previous image, correct? So
Yeah, the front.
that is proposed as vinyl shake look, and then the porch lower gable, which is currently, yes, that one. So that's not in scope, correct? You're not proposing to do anything to this smaller gable?
Other than change the color to match whatever the other gables are.
Okay. And do you know what material this lower gable is currently?
It's currently wood.
Okay. I think I believe it was Margaret that said cedar, real wood cedar shakes would be appropriate for the upper gable end, especially since I believe this is the front face elevation.
Yeah, just gonna third that, because that side elevation is prominent, you can see it walking down the street. And yeah, and that upper one, and it's like you're already going in there and adjusted the size of the windows and things, and so that had to be worked out. I would argue that no vinyl, I would be against vinyl shake in the gables, but the colors seem good.
I agree with that. I think that the colors are appropriate for the structure, but given the existing condition, I would not support vinyl on the gable, but I think that the wood shake would be appropriate.
Okay.
I agree with my colleagues on all of the above. I'm gonna try to find a snippet of like a porch lattice piece that I think would be the most historically appropriate, which is like a vertical slat lattice, not a cross lattice. And I'll drop into the chat for your consideration, but agreed on all the other comments from my colleagues. Also, wait, a question. Actually, while we're looking at this, can you clarify what was existing and what was? I mean, I can clearly see the
Yeah.
new wood, so that's new, but the rest of the railing styles, was that existing?
Yeah, so all of the other was existing. Up until the corner of the home,
Mm-hmm.
that was all encapsulate. That was all porch. That was just encapsulated with siding, and then they just
Okay.
used it as like a storage closet.
Okay.
And that's why that was like the last thing inside that we had to decide on, like, do we just continue to use it as a closet, or do we put a window there and put it to where it was before? Because there was a window there before and the porch went all the way to where it is now. So that's why we did that.
Okay. Okay.
And the color of the skirting, I mean, or you'll put if you send an example in
Yeah, I'm
the
gonna try
chat.
to find the right. That's just the stylistic,
Okay.
like construction kind of it. Color scheme wise, let me see what you. I mean, I think the colors you picked are great, so I put no problems with the colors.
Yeah, I would, two thoughts for consideration from me on the skirting color. So the lighter color you go, the better it'll shield any visibility into the underside of the porch. But the contrasting problem that creates is if it's against, in this case, mulch, any wash from rain is going to show up better on the lighter color. So in my opinion, in this particular instance, I think the darker color would be more appropriate, assuming there's nothing underneath the porch that would be egregious if kind of more visible with darker color paint.
When we opened up the porch, or when we opened up the side of the house, everything underneath the porch was removed and anything boards were redone. It's all brand new. So there is nothing in there. So I wouldn't have any issues putting a darker color there.
Are there any other comments? Or would someone like to make a motion?
Let me take a stab at it. So I move to approve the project with the requirement of wood shakes for where submitted as vinyl look, and recommend a darker color for the skirting, and approve the colors as submitted for the window trim.
Do we have a second?
Should we request that they come back once we see that it's wood, or do you think, is that something that we need to see again?
Everything, you could also say that everything be reviewed by staff.
I would be up for that.
Yeah. And we want to make sure that the skirting's being replaced with lattice.
All right. So I amend my motion to require the submission of the corrected lattice to be submitted and reviewed by Landmark staff.
I'll second that.
Are there any other comments? Well, then I will call the roll. Ms. Flaherty,
Yes.
Ms. Land,
Yes.
Ms. Marinucci,
Yes.
Ms. Persons.
Before I answer, I think Dan had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, everyone. So I just want to go back to the cedar shake.
Hang on, hang on. We actually do have to take, we're in the middle of the vote, so
Oh,
hang on.
okay. Sorry.
We can
Yes.
clarify after that.
So yeah, I'll answer my role. Yes.
And Mr. Talley.
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes. Dan, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, it was more about what you had said, ma'am, about the stain. So I mean, obviously stain would be different than paint in terms of colors. Is that something that if wood was to be put on the gables, it would be something that would have to be stained, or could I paint that?
No, you could paint that. You can also talk with the Sherwin or whoever you're working with about an opaque stain. A lot of times they can make an opaque stain match a paint color.
All right.
I just suggested that because it will last a lot longer and then you will have less maintenance to do. So
You'll just typically want, with cedar shakes, you'll want to wait a few days to weeks after you install it to paint it, if you don't pre-paint it, because it will shrink up to a 1/4 inch each shingle or shake because of the air drying once it's on the wall.
And we will follow up with you, Dan.
Yep. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Our next item is case OC 23-49, 45 West, Lorena West 45th Street, partial demolition and new construction. Okay. Presenters, go ahead.
How you doing, everyone? Chad Curtis from My Place Group. Excited to present you all our current plans. We've taken a lot of feedback, listened to it from the different boards, different community members, and we actually engaged a different architect and kind of listened again to everything that was said and re-envisioned the project. I think we've put together something that does the best of meeting a lot of the different opinions and desires of the outcome. So I'm got Denver from Vocon, who is going to kind of talk you through the new plans and the layouts, and then I'll be happy to answer any specific questions. But I guess, Denver, I'll let you describe the project from here.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. We're happy to be able to make this presentation, and we're pretty excited about the re-envisioning of this project. So we'll go next. Simply locating the site, and this drawing outlines that this is a very peculiarly irregular shaped site that navigates its way around some existing context. Next. Within the overall immediate portion of the district, we looked, as we developed the plan and the massing for this, we looked at the whole district. What's interesting about this historic district, it encompasses a great range in terms of residential and commercial development over a period of time. And over that period of time, commercial buildings and taller buildings sometimes occurred intermittently among lower, even within the historic context. So I think it's an important thing to think about as we look at both the immediate context and the overall historic district. Next. And here we see a few examples of both old and new buildings within the historic district and a relative immediate context. And one of the things that sometimes happens with these older buildings, particularly the two at the upper right, is they're positioned next to lower two-story buildings, creating something similar to the dynamic that we're seeing on the development site that we're going to show you our new solution for. Next. So now we're closing in. So the bottom of the page, Lorraine Avenue, 44th to the right, 45th to the left, irregularly shaped site, maneuvering between a single family house at the northeast corner and a gas station at the southeast corner, and what I believe is a auto body or a repair shop of some sort at the southwest corner, and an empty, well, not an empty lot, a commercially used lot to the north along 45th. Next. And then a visual on the current context, just in terms of the nature of the site and kind of a very irregular disposition of existing buildings and empty lots. Next. This is the new plan. The hallmark of this plan is that it's 3 buildings, not 1. And that was one of the things as we looked at each street and tried to knit together a multifamily development in here, and the greater context that as a singular building was a bit large, which this group commented on previously. And 3 buildings scaled each of the pieces more similar to existing structures that are in the immediate and near context of the Landmarks District. So building 1 to the left on 45th Street is a 20-unit, 3-story building. And as you'll see in the renderings later, it takes on a townhome kind of character. The west side of it with ground floor units and entrances, and the east side of it, some covered indoor parking with a little alley that separates it from building 2, which occupies the middle of the site and fronts Lorraine Avenue. It is built around and adjoins the existing historic building that's the piece that we're maintaining is in the darker blue at the lower left of that building on Lorraine Avenue. And building 2 is a 5-story building with 59 residential units and indoor parking on the first floor behind the historic building and the new lobby that fronts Lorraine. And then building 3, the last building, which fronts 44th Street and follows a new vehicular and fire access alley along the north side of the property, creating a significant setback similar to other alleys that exist all over various parts of the city and this historic district. Next. This is the second floor and typical floor plan that shows the disposition of the various unit types in the 3 buildings, with buildings 1 and 3 being walk-up buildings. As I mentioned before, building 1 has 20 units, building 3 has 8, and building 2 there in the middle has 59. Next. And then the top floor, the 5th floor of building 2 has a setback on Lorraine, creating a terrace for use of all residents and a small amenities community room that accesses that terrace. Next. This plan delineates all of the proposed setbacks for each of the 3 buildings from all the property lines, and provides overall dimensions, perimeter dimensions for each of the buildings. This is intention of this drawing is information and as a basis for the planning department to review zoning and make an assessment with respect to how we approach some of the zoning issues that we need to resolve. The other thing that I'll point out is that we are showing 48 parking spaces between the 3 buildings, all of which are covered. There are no open parking spaces on the property. This is the overall massing of the 3 buildings. It helps kind of visualize how the plan works and how we've navigated our way around the other commercial properties on Lorraine. And again, Lorraine has evolved over time, very long time. These 3 buildings set up a condition such that the 2 corners, the gas station and the other building, at some point in the future lends itself to something that might be complementary or can simply stay this way for however many years. Next. Here we're on 45th Street looking south. This is the existing condition. To the right, you see the 2.5-story homes with relatively close to the sidewalk. Lap siding generally, some buildings with brick in the neighborhood, but a predominance of lap siding at the residential scale. Next. This is the proposed building 1 shown in the existing context. So as I noted earlier in the planning of this, we look to kind of vertical modulation that a townhome provides as a basis for this design. Gave us an opportunity to insert roof forms that are called to the more historic homes in the neighborhood. So we get a rhythm of peaked roofs, similar to what you're seeing on the right side in the single family homes. We've set the building back enough to provide a landscape buffer between the public sidewalk and the front of the building, and combination of ground level terrace and balconies that are the new porches for this building, similar to the 1-story porches that exist on the residential homes. So that notion of activating a residential street with a social porch. Next. And then this is just moving down the street and looking more an elevation view at the proposed building. And the entrance there, we see the bottom left being the entrance into a shared stairway that accesses the upper level units. Next. So here we're on Lorraine looking east and at 45th, and then next. So then this is putting into context, you can see building 1 there to the left with the gabled roofs just behind that 1-story brick commercial building. And then we see the 5-story building 2 with the setback right there on Lorraine for the amenities terrace. You also note that we've retained the front portion of the historic building with the gabled roof and integrated it into the overall project, maintaining that piece of the historic fabric. Next. And then on Lorraine, more of an elevation view, the new 5-story building next to the existing historical or house-like structure, and then the empty or the commercial properties to the left and to the right of this ensemble. Next. And then this is lower left, the existing condition of that home. Our proposal is very modest adjustments to its facade, removal of the decorative metal shutters and screens, which clearly are not historical, and basically restoring the facade and painting elements that are currently blue, a dark charcoal color, and that in the gutter and cornice line at that roof eave edge. Very simple, modest adjustments, retaining its character and being probably more appropriate for that building. Next. So here we are on Lorraine and 44th, looking kind of northwest, gas station in the foreground, two-story residential home, the first resident on 44th to the north of this intersection. Next. And then here we see building 3 in the foreground, occupying the empty lot between the gas station and that first two-story residential home. And then building 5, or building 2, 5-story building wrapping behind, kind of embracing the gas station, so to speak. You also see in the foreground, immediately behind the gas station, the proposed landscape buffer between gas station and the new building 3. Next. This is a view on 44th Street looking west, building 3 there in the foreground, and access to the covered parking off this access alley, and the dark shade to the right refers to the existing residential home that's next door, and provision of a setback for this new alley to that building that allows us to provide a landscape buffer continuously along the entire north edge of the property. Next. And then we're on 44th, just another context view. And then next. You see how the new 3-story building, building 3, continues the language again of the gabled roofs that we see on the single-family houses on the street. Comes at, is reiterated again in the new structure, continuing kind of the scale, modularity of the single-family homes. Next. And I think there's a series of two-dimensional elevations that just kind of helps kind of bring it all around, a little bit more architectural in nature. I'll point out a few additional things that we've done. In general, our goal here with this project was to build something that we knitted into the neighborhood. We're not looking to call attention to the building. They're very modest in terms of their styling. They're not statement buildings. They're picking up on the fenestration patterns that are in existing commercial and residential buildings, predominantly double hung, very simple windows, punched openings, lap siding, gable roofs, adding components for activation through stoops and balconies, much like porches on single-family homes. This is building 1 on 45th. Next. This is the west side of that building. That is basically the small vehicular access alley between this building and the west side of building 2. Generally not visible from the street or the neighbors. Next. And the north end of that building. And again, what we did with both ends of this building is shape the end of it such that it became a double gable. So on the street, as you're walking down, You're not immediately confronted with a larger full gable with the width of the building, but the smaller one you see there to the right, because it bumps out a little bit from the other face. Next. And then the same on the south end. Next. And then elevation view of building 2 on Lorraine. Shows a kind of more glassy amenities area that's set back at the 5th floor, and the lower 4 floors following a fairly traditional compositional approach of regularly spaced windows, clear delineation of the bottom, clear delineation of the top. Next. And this is the north end of that building, and that's where off the alley you see the overhead door, which is accesses the parking on the 1st floor of that building. Next. Next. Go. This is the east side of building 2 that generally faces the gas station. Next. And my bearings here. This is the west face of building 2 that is opposite the long face of building 1 that we looked at earlier. Next. And then this is building 3. This is the north face, the alley elevation. Picking up on some of the similar architectural features of building 1 with a rhythmic use of gabled forms to modulate the length of the building. Next. And then the south face with the landscape buffer to the fuel station. Next. And then the east face of building 3 on 44th. And next. And that is the west end of the same building that would be facing the side of building 1 or building 2. Next. A palette of materials. As you saw, there's really 2 building materials. The brick that we saw building 2 at the south end and the base of it. Lap siding on the balance of building 2 and all of buildings 1 and 3. The building 1 building on 45th, the front and the 2 accentuated small gable ends would be in fiber cement board. The balance of the building in matching siding color. And then building 3 all in lap siding vinyl. You'll see that it's a fairly muted palette, darker shades generally. We find that 1, in the historic neighborhoods, a lot of the homes are darker, richer tones. These are kind of background and earthy. And we also believe that vinyl siding appears its best in the darker colors. So there's multiple reasons for the color selection. Next. And then this is the landscape plan. And generally what we've done is a continuous landscape buffer along the north edge of the new access alley. Landscape buffers at the perimeter of any of our buildings to the adjacent commercial properties. And then on 44th and 45th, a setback sufficient to provide residential scale variety of foundation plantings at the fronts of those buildings. Combination of something flowering like hydrangeas, something evergreen, some possibly a range of perennials, evergreen, flowering deciduous at the base. And some of the trees that we're looking at initially, given the kind of tight site parameters, the English oaks work really well in those kinds of situations. They grow tall, they stay relatively narrow, so things like that can work along the south edge of building 3 and the west edge of building 1. So we're kind of thoughtfully looking at the scale of each of the trees and what they can accomplish and add to the architecture, because landscape is very much a part of the overall architectural statement. And I believe there may be one more slide. Lighting is kept very modest. We want this to be safe, but we also want it to feel residential in character. So we have 2 types: a very understated small area light you see at the bottom right, and that's designated by the yellow or orange circles. So we have one out over to the right, small dog park between east face of, I won't call it dog park, I'll call it a dog run for residents on the east side of building 2 behind the service station. So we have a light out there to keep it safe. And then the blue squares representative of those wall-mounted lanterns that you see in the upper right. So the whole north face of building 3 there to the right is a rhythm of those lanterns on either side of the overhead doors and at the stair pedestrian entries into the upper level apartments, and locating those at the entrances to the building 1 to the left. It's a very simple approach to that. Low scale, no poles, everything meant to light the pedestrian vehicular paths, but in a residential way. And I believe that may be the end of the deck. Yes, it is. There's a lot to take in, and I realize this is quite different from what you've saw previously, but we're ready to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Denver. Before we begin, Carl, are there any public comment?
Thank you, Alex. I'm going to turn it over to OCI first. I think believe they had this up on Co-Urbanize. If they could talk about that a little bit, and then we will, Jessica will talk about the public comments that we've received here.
Thank you, Carl. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Nate Law with Ohio City Incorporated. I'm joined by Chris Schmidt, our board chair. I'll be very brief. I just wanted to quickly run through the timeline for this project and some of the comments that we've received since this new iteration of the project has been posted on Urbanize, which again is our community engagement platform that we use for development projects. So, OCI's role throughout this process has been facilitating community engagement. There have been 11 meetings, included those hosted with nearby residents as this project has gone through the city processes. Again, additionally, this project has been updated via Urbanize since February of 2023. Some of the comments we heard after we posted this most recent iteration were the concern of parking, traffic safety at the nearby intersections of 45th and 44th in Lorraine, the height of building 2 as it steps towards the residential district. We've also heard that this iteration of the project is an improvement and the right step in the direction. I believe some of the comments particularly called out building 1 and 3, so the more townhouse looking buildings, as a big improvement. And there's been some positive comments about building 2 as well, but there's been still some outlying issues of concern for many. Overall, we share the concern of traffic safety at this intersection nearby and recognize that it is not the onus of one developer to fix traffic safety problems in the city of Cleveland. However, we're hopeful that we can be committed to working with neighbors, the developer, and the councilman to design and implement a solution for traffic calming at these nearby locations that keep our community safe. So overall, we don't have a position on the development, but we feel obligated to continue to raise the concern and hopeful solution over roadway safety for all users. So thank you.
Jump in with the comments that we've received at Landmarks. We received 23 comments for this project prior to our Tuesday deadline. Those were compiled and emailed to committee members Tuesday afternoon. A summary of the comments, a lot of them were similar to what Nate had specified in regards to parking concerns, traffic concerns, neighborhood safety, and use and proposed density and infrastructure in the area. Some specific concerns or comments that were brought up was the loss of green space, improvements with the introduction of buildings 1 and 3, concern on the appropriateness of vinyl materials and the just where the materials are located on the buildings with the bricks and the vinyl, the height on building 2 with the height of 5 stories is appropriate for the historic district, zoning concerns for the residential versus commercial boundary that it kind of straddles a little bit, notes on the inappropriate scale and material for districts. There was support for addressing gaps in the landscape and infilling these empty areas. There was a concern on the alley creation and curb cuts in regard to safety, concern with more demolition of the existing building, and support for the landscaping proposed. There were some comments on the bike parking proposed and proposed lighting around. The lighting looked like it was proposed just for the interior areas and not the exterior areas of the building. And there was a comment on just the heights in relation to the other buildings around it, just an accuracy of renderings, and questions about the existing dumpster on the site on 44th. So overall, we received a good number of comments. And yeah.
Jessica, Carl, are there any other comments?
At this time, no.
All right, well, I guess I'll go first. I have a number of items on the list, but I will, Denver and Chad, I will try to go quickly. First, though, I want to thank you for the edits that you've made to this project. I think they are undoubtedly an improvement on where you started. So thank you with that. You've taken public concern seriously, and I think you've addressed many of them. My comments are, first, I'll start with materiality. There's a lot of vinyl, both in windows and in siding. And that's a big issue, as you heard from the prior applicant, that we typically do not support vinyl in the historic district. And that's a big one for me. It's my number 1 item, and it's a dispositive item. I would like to see them all return to either hardy board, aluminum clad wood windows, but something more appropriate for the historic district. The second point, and Carl, if we could turn to the slide that shows the West 44th perspective. Could you go one more? I think one more. Perfect, thank you. Concern here is that the front doors, I think that to the extent you can call them front doors, are along this created alley. And I don't see on the renderings or in this image here, a sidewalk for pedestrian access. And I want to raise that issue as both a safety concern and as a design concern. The front of it, as it faces 44th, I think that those windows there should have some space in between them to mark the fenestration of the more historic buildings and single family homes on that street. The panels that are seen throughout between above and below the windows, I like to see those filled with the surrounding material, whether that's hardy or whether that's brick. Whatever number I'm up to, the screening between buildings 1 and building 2 as seen from Lorraine. So if we could, Carl, go to the back side of, I think it's called building 1. there's one, it's just, oh, that's it, there you go. That I think undoubtedly lacks a lot of detail, and I was wondering if we could add a little bit more detail to that facade of the building. Now, I know that's an interior facing, but I think you would, at least looking at the site plan here, look at that from Lorraine. Another solution would be to have a dense array of landscape planting there so that that facade would not be visible from if you're looking north on Lorraine Avenue. Carl, if we go to the landscape plan. Yeah, perfect. They're on the west 45th side. I think we can squeeze in a few more street trees there than just the 3 shown. And I would suggest something that's very friendly to our urban environment, grows quickly, and is a nice shade tree like a London plane. I think would be an excellent species there, as well as on the west 44th side and wherever else you can squeeze them in. For the evergreen screening elsewhere on the site plan, I like that. I would strongly suggest that you plant more mature evergreens so that we're not waiting 4 or 5, whatever years for them to grow and provide the screening that is sought. If we go, Carl, to the rendition from Lorraine and 44th looking northwest past the gas station. That's perfect, thank you. That's a very prominent view shed that many people will see as they're driving west on Lorraine. And I'm appreciative that the brick returns as far as it does, but I think that there needs to be some additional detailing on that facade, since it's such a prominent facade, whether that be the continuation of a cornice in a hardyboard material or other detailing with regard to framing of the windows. There are a couple of options that are not all that expensive that I think would add a lot of visual interest and detail to that facade. Carl, I won't make you go all the way back to the lighting page, but the lighting plan I like as presented, but I think it lacks lighting on West 44th and 45th and on Lorraine. And I think that needs to be, I think that was one of the public comments as well. It needs to be addressed. And I'm nearing the end of my list here. If we could go to the West 45th Street side. I'll pause right there real quick, Carl. Those windows on the brick part of it, on the Lorraine side that's facing Lorraine, the windows are separated, which is the appropriate historic fenestration of windows. I would like to see that on the brick part here that we're looking at, that's that you would see if you're driving east on Lorraine, to have those windows separated in the same manner to mimic the historic fenestration. And then Carl, if you keep going back one more into the 45th. Yeah. I know that those are doors on the balconies and not sliders, but given the large window pane there, it reads a bit as a slider. And I wonder if you would consider putting just a regular window there that's not full length, so that it reads more like a door and not a slider, which I don't think would be appropriate in the historic district. My final comment, and I think that this one is more for zoning and planning and less for design, but I will note that there's 87 units and 48 parking spaces. And I share the concern of the neighbors that the overflow parking will inevitably end up on the side streets, and that is a concern. I don't know that that is a concern for design review, but I will raise it that I think it is an appropriate concern. Those are my comments. Thank you for listening.
I echo Alex's concerns about the materiality. I really cannot support the vinyl in the historic district. I think like many of the public comments stated, the buildings 1 and 3 have a pretty good relationship with the neighbors on those streets. But I still don't feel that building number 2, that the height is appropriate in the district. I know you cited some other taller buildings in the area, but they don't encroach back as far into the residential neighborhoods. And I think the immediate context, there is not something of this height. Looking right across the street, there were no pictures of what's across the street, but I just don't see something that's that tall. And I think 4 stories should be the maximum in this location. Also with the historic house, taking as much away from that property as shown here, I just don't then see as much design relationship with it and the new structure as there had been in some of the things we had seen in the past. Then it's almost like, why keep it if you're taking as much away from that house as you are? So some concerns with that. But my biggest concern is definitely the height of building number 2. Thank you.
I'd like to echo sentiments. I think there are more prominent views of buildings 1 and 3, 2 as well on the site that would call for fiber cement than vinyl. This one that Alex mentioned, but I think looks like the sides and front of building 1 and kind of the sides and front, both sides, almost all 4 sides of building 3 would require fiber cement to fit into the historic district. I appreciated what you said about not making statement pieces, especially with those buildings 1 and 3. I think for one, they are already taller than their neighbors. Like you're doing 35 feet to the midpoint of the gable, and kind of keeping with like the townhouse code. So I think it's already going to be a bit taller than its surroundings, and I think it lacks character. I think it loses a lot of the character that makes the neighborhood so walkable and so scaled for people. And so I guess let's see, which view is it? There's a view. Let me scroll through. There's a view looking at the. I can't find it now. Never mind. Well, like I said, I think it's lacking some of the character, and I think it could be. I don't know if it's additional material for those. I don't know if it's a brick base, or masonry base in some cases. But I think there are going to need to be some more moves to bring it down the scale. Because, like I said, I think that's already going to be pretty tall compared to their neighbors, and they're already going to make a statement. And I'm a little bit, I guess I'm a little bit underwhelmed by 1 and 3 as well. From the use of the vinyl to I think the forms are very simple and I think they're very straightforward, but I'm a little bit disappointed in them. I think your organization of the site is great. I appreciate that. I don't mind the 5th floor on the building 2. I like that it steps back from Lorraine. I don't know if there's I think as you add more detail, it might help flesh it out a little bit more. But yeah, I think my main thing is with buildings 1 and 3. I don't think that they're there yet for this neighborhood. And I do want to echo what Alex said about the pedestrian path to those doors along that alley. I would imagine that would be a requirement for townhouses that kind of in the back lot. So I think that's going to be have to be something that you look at. And then I think that's all I had to say.
I can go next if anyone else, if you guys are good with that. I think I'm very much in alignment with what was previously said in terms of the use of vinyl. I would, by far, I would also, I think, not support any vinyl products on this size of a build or this scale of development. And I think we also just need to be consistent with what we are approving and requiring of projects throughout the district. And to that point, I think for building, I know I feel like I'm like constantly not sure which building I'm talking about, 45th building. That one is pretty close to me. I really appreciate the simplicity in general take. Like I agree kind of with Philip that there is maybe a lack of character, but I feel like bringing out more detail. If you were to switch to an all hardy or this facade that already was proposed to be hardy, adding a little, I see corner boards, but can we add in rake boarding? I think uncoupling the windows for this building and for the other 44th building would both be a great move in terms of fitting in a little bit more with the historic context. The other thing which maybe would be others would maybe not agree with is I actually think that those gables should be a little steeper. I think that they're a little bit flatter, and that's what's kind of giving it like a bit of a suburban feel, for lack of a better description, or a descriptor I had seen used in some of the public comment. So it looks like in the straight elevation views that there is a gable that's higher, you know, the cross gable is a higher pit elevation, so maybe those can just steepen to either match, or I understand that it might make the building appear taller, but I don't necessarily share the same height concerns that I know a lot of others do. For the, let's see, if you can go, Carl, to the ones that are on 44th, maybe the view. Yeah, those ones. The 45th building is better for me in terms of overall like character kind of fitting in. This one's trickier, I think, just from a site orientation. I agree with the contact comments. Establishing a safe and defined walkway to those units is really important. Something about, I think, again, I think it would benefit from maybe a little bit of a steeper pitch to that cross gable. Uncoupling the windows definitely, I think, would help. The other thing that is not quite sitting with me, or not quite, that I think is just some tweaking might be involved, is the way the massings are extruded here. Like it's almost like extruding them in this like bay-esque motif, but it doesn't touch the ground, or should it touch the ground, or are the right things being extruded, or I don't know what the answer is, but I think looking at that kind of push and pull play would help kind of keep that looking too generic or lack of character, as Philip put it. For the front building, if you can go to that, Carl, the Lorraine facing building, I just would like a little bit more overall aesthetically. This is definitely on the right path for me personally, in my opinion. I also do not share the height concern. I really appreciate the amount of comments we have received for that, and I appreciate Margaret's feedback there. I personally just don't share that same concern. I think I was trying to figure out how tall the Dexter is, which is another building in the residential context. And of course, every project's not one for one, but that to me does not seem too tall. And this seems in line with that for me. That said, my question is for the use of the face brick, and we're showing some dimension like banding in this rendering, and recessed pieces of brickwork, which I think could be really lovely details, especially used in one material. But my question is, how is that achieved with face brick from a constructability standpoint? Does it need to be real brick? I would love to see more detail on that treatment in particular, as well as what the cornice material that's being shown is. And then my other question, kind of born of the public comments, is the balance of the retail space to the lobby space. And my question, I think, for you guys would just be, what does that, how does that comply with the retail overlay? Is there any chance of modifying what might be retail or what might be lobby? It's an interesting comment. And then the last two I have, sorry, this is a long list. Also echoing what the lighting of the street facing facades are, because the lighting plan did not include those. And I'm not sure if that's something you're coming back with, but we definitely would love to see a lot of lighting. And I know that previous buildings by my place have included lots of lighting. So I'm hoping that that can be included here. And then the last thing is from the traffic concern question mark. I'm personally, and I had encouraged you previously, Chad, to explore the alley buffer. I think it's a really good strategy in terms of addressing that separation and concern. A good comment that was brought up in the public comments was that the 44th side is egressing into a right-hand only turning lane, and that's, I guess, a question mark for what the city would allow or how that would actually work. Nate said earlier in the meeting that there's going to be a big push for advocacy on Ohio City Inc.'s end. I'm also a board member there for addressing the really, really valid traffic concerns of this area much more broadly and putting a lot of pressure on the city to address that. But in looking at the alley, I guess the question could be, is there an option for it to be a one-way alley where you're entering 44th and exiting 45th so that you're not feeding traffic into a right-hand only lane? Has that been explored, or would that be an option to consider? So that was a lot, sorry.
Not to add on even more, but I'll try to keep mine short. Most of the members have already brought up most of my comments. So I want to start off. I appreciate the muted palette. I think in general it's understated and it's well refined. So I want to start off on the Lorraine elevation. If you could flip to that one. So I think this is actually a very successful elevation. I think the proportions are well studied. My concern with this is actually relatively minor. It actually is also related to the banding and the way that this is broken up. I think it needs a little bit more in terms of the way it's acknowledging the pedestrian experience on the urban surface, the sidewalk. I think it feels a little too artificial and a little too flat now. I think it needs to address its height and the way it brings itself to the ground. It feels a little bit too like a single 4-story elevation and not broken up so that it acknowledges people on the sidewalk. Maybe that'll bring down its apparent scale a little bit from passersby. And I also want to talk about the way that this 5-story building feels like a 4-story building because of the amenity on the roof. And I think that strategy should be attempted or at least reconciled with the north end of the building, how that, which is the residential end of the site, that strategy should be studied, because that 5-story height to me is a little bit, well, it's not a little bit, it's much too tall for how it transitions into immediately 2.5-story homes. So beyond that, the building 1 elevation on West 45th, I also think the pitch of these intermediate gables could benefit from an additional bit of slope. And then for me, the intermediate mint coloration siding, I think that could benefit from a different material, just something that would provide relief on the rhythm of the elevations. I don't know what that is, but I think it warrants a little bit of study so that this building doesn't feel quite so monolithic in comparison to the buildings across the street. And it kind of echoes the sentiment towards building 3, the way that building is also the same lap siding stretched across the entire facade. So I think everyone's covered the rest of my comments, so I want to keep it relatively brief. But other than that, I think this is close. My concern is mostly with building 2.
In hearing everyone's comments, a comment about the alley and it would be making it one way from 45th to 44th, I think is a good one, and would also could potentially alleviate my concern about not having a pedestrian walkway to those front doors for the 44th, for building 3. And the last comment about stepping down the height of the 5-story building as an approach to the rear of the property is one that I can get behind as well. Are there any other comments?
I agree with your comment, Alex, on the height of, well, and Chris's comment on the height of building 2. I think that a similar approach to what's happening on Lorraine would be beneficial to the site. Most of my thoughts have been echoed by others, but I would say for building 1 and building 3, a reconsideration of materiality, not doing the vinyl siding would definitely help with the character of those buildings, as Phil mentioned. So just wanted to put this out there.
All right, I guess I have a question for the applicant. You've received quite a bit of feedback here this afternoon. Would you like to take that feedback and incorporate it and come back? And so we would table this? Or are you requesting a vote this afternoon?
Well, I guess, yeah, I know we have heard a bit of feedback, and it sounds like a lot of it's to the details on the different buildings and materials, which I think we can satisfy pretty much all of those. You know, a lot of the comments, even the window panels, we can make those work. I think with some of the bays coming down, I think those are good adjustments. The lighting on the street sides, definitely, if that wasn't in there, it's something we want to brighten up the streets at nighttime so it's visible. So I think we will table it, so to speak. I know that we were scheduled, I believe, for landmarks next week. I would like to table it, but also get their feedback in case there's something else that we can then incorporate and then come back for a final approval vote at that point. But yeah, no, I appreciate the feedback from everyone. I think we've heard a lot of comments and we've done our best to adjust the site. And I think we've done a good job, and confident we can continue to make a couple more tweaks and have it where you all would like to see it.
Carl, does that work on your end? If we table this and allow them to go down to landmarks?
I think if we table this and they make all the adjustments or make us, I don't think it's necessary to go to landmarks next week. I think if they're addressing most of the concerns that are here and you guys give a pretty good full-blown assessment of things, that going for would essentially be a concept review at landmarks, I don't think would benefit this. I think what you guys have said, and if that's it, I think that's enough. And we can go ahead and bump them to the next meeting, which is only 2 weeks after that. So if they came back here in 2 weeks, which is what, the 5th, they could go on October 12th.
Okay.
I would, if I could ask, I mean, what has happened in the past with this particular project is we do this, we don't hear landmarks, we make adjustments, then we go to landmarks and they tell us to make more adjustments. I would like to get their feedback and hear what they would like us to adjust, as well as from their opinion of that board, before we go changing everything multiple times and we're stuck in a whirlwind of comments. So I think it would, well, like I said, I mean, I can highlight some of the notes I've got. Sidewalk access, which maybe the one-way alley can reduce, spacing out the windows on 44th, filling in the panels between the windows, the back of 45th, a little bit more detail, more street trees, particularly a London plane on 45th, the cornice potentially kind of coming as a band on the top of the building from the Lorraine, framing and some other details on the windows from this particular view that we're looking at. Double hungs on 45th, patios instead of just a single long panel. Obviously, I heard the comments about vinyl and using more cement board where applicable. What else I got? It's not the same. More character just where we can. Again, there was a pedestrian path. some steeper gables, and that's something we can look at. We tried to make the buildings on 45th and 44th conform with the height district that it's in, but we can do a little bit of adjustments there. I guess also in a face brick comment, our intent is to use real brick, whole brick, not just a face, just an aesthetic appeal. We want to use the whole brick. So it might be a wording change we can make. But I think, like I said, we've got a lot of those comments we can implement. But if there's additional from landmarks, I think it'd be very imperative that we hear it sooner so we can make those adjustments and then come back to them with both boards' comments combined into one plan.
Carl, if we could do that procedurally, that would be my preference, because there's so many changes and so many variables that I don't feel comfortable with a vote just on the recommendations.
If we table it here, I will have to check with our law department based upon what the rules and regulations would be, and we'd have to get back to you.
If we convert this right now to a conceptual review, what we've just done, would that alleviate the issue?
I don't know if this committee has that ability to do that. That's beyond I don't know the rules well enough to say. I know the Landmarks Commission can take something off of conceptual to make it final, but not the other way around.
Is that something that the applicant can do at this moment?
It's already on the. I think it's already on the agenda for final.
Okay.
So in the past, we've had to keep it that way.
Could we make a motion to table that includes the recommendation for a concept review from landmarks?
You could probably, yes.
Would someone?
It's all, yes. Make the recommendation and staff will follow up to see if that is doable.
Would someone like to make that motion? Yeah, you're on mute.
I'm talking to my colleague.
Oh, sorry. Would someone like to make that motion?
Sure. I will make the motion to table this with the recommendation that when it's heard from by landmarks at their next meeting, that it's reviewed as conceptual. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Carl.
Clarity?
Yes.
Ms. Land?
Yes.
Ms. Marinucci?
Yes.
Ms. Persons?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Frondorf?
Yes.
Motion to table with a recommendation for concept review by landmarks passes unanimously.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your all feedback and working with me. Thank you.
Carl, before the next item is called, I will recuse so someone else can step in as chair.
Carl, I think I have to recuse as well.
Yes.
Right, Alex?
Okay. Yep.
Okay.
Just so you know, Jessica is going to be taking over the PowerPoint. I have another meeting at 2, so just in case I might have to duck out at 2 o'clock. So we'll have we have the concept review case number OC 23-50 for Irishtown Bend Park. This is a concept review for feedback only, and there will be no vote taken. So will the applicant please introduce themselves and begin their project?
I'm Joel Viscus. I'm with Land Studio. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. I'll turn it over in a little bit to our designer after I give just a little explanation. As everyone knows, Irishtown Bend is just a large overall multi-step project. The port just started its stabilization efforts a couple weeks ago, but the overall initiative wouldn't be possible without just a huge collaborative effort. So, everyone from the county, the port, NOACA, the sewer district, the city, the Cleveland Metro Parks, West Tree Conservancy, Ohio City Incorporated, and I'm probably forgetting a few, but a lot of everybody's working together on this project. Today, Land Studio and Ohio City Incorporated will be presenting because we're leading the design effort for this. But really, it's the work of many organizations that we wouldn't be here without everybody else's support. So today I'll be presenting. Well, we'll be presenting for conceptual review the park, and I just want to be certain it's because in some of our slides we show adjoining projects, such as RTA's BRT planning efforts that they have for West 25th. We're just seeking review for what's in the park, the boundaries of the park property itself, nothing that's in the right of way. And also another note is Cleveland Metro Parks, which is part of this overall effort. They're working on the Cleveland Foundation Centennial Lakeland Trail that will go through the park. They've secured funds to design that, and they've hired the same designer as we have. So that's part of the park itself. And I think with that, I'll turn it over to our designer, Scott Katoff of Plural. He's been working with us since 2017, actually before then, but he'll walk you through the presentation. Thank you.
Developments on the park design. I had it, there's a lot of in this deck, so I had an abbreviated version that I was hoping to share, but I didn't realize the protocol here was to use what we had previously submitted. So I might skip over a couple of these slides. Please feel free to interject with questions if I'm moving too quickly, but there's 80 slides in here. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but let's dive in. So who is it, Jessica or Carl? Are you advancing the slides or?
That'll be Jessica. Yeah.
Jessica, thanks, Jessica. Okay. So I just say next slide. Is that the way you want to move? Okay, thanks. So as Joel mentioned, I mean, this is a sampling of our project partners, both from a design perspective and but also fundraising and outreach. So we're really excited to bring this kind of great group of people together to work super collaboratively over the last I don't know, as Joel mentioned, it's been quite a few years since we've been working on this to envision this new space for the neighborhood and the city. Next slide, please. I think this was just there to respond to the form. So next slide. This neighborhood is, it's such a fantastic place with such rich history and so many wonderful landmarks and stories latent in the site and in the neighborhood. So as you see, we've kind of drawn from these as inspirations for the design of the park. Next slide, please. So our 25-acre park here sits in the nexus of the neighborhood along the river. It is, the innermost ring is a 5-minute walk. So you can see within that, you can get to Ohio City Farm, Lutheran Hospital, Riverview Tower, the West Side Market District. And then within a 10-minute walk, which is that larger circle, we connect to the Ohio City Historic District neighborhood. We connect to Lakeview Estates and Lakeview Tower. So really it's, a very short distance to walk to this new park to expand open space for the neighborhood, which is, I think, a great opportunity for the neighborhood and the city. Next slide, please. So as Joel mentioned, I mean, we have been working on a planning effort since 2017 to kind of bring a bunch of pieces together, but they're under separate review processes. So I've just kind of highlighted them here. We know that West 25th Street is, we've been working with the RTA team to imagine how that right-of-way, how the park actually can support the right-of-way and some of the great improvements they're looking at for transit and bike and pedestrian safety. We're working with the Ohio City Farm, the Lakeview Tower residents, and their design team on how the farm could interface with the park and be more inviting to the neighborhood as a part of the park experience. But we won't be talking about either of those today because they're not technically within the boundaries of our scope. Next slide, please. So this is the plan that had received conceptual approval by the Planning Commission back in 2017. This came out of a couple year community engagement process. This was before the Port of Cleveland started their stabilization efforts. So what we've been working on since then is, and what we're sharing with you today, is an update to this approved 2017 concept plan that incorporates the geotechnical and structural strategies that the port is improving and just began construction last month. So next slide, please. And, you know, this has been a long and winding road to get here. We're highlighted in yellow there at our community design review today, but this has been in the works since 1992 as a vision as part of the North Cuyahoga Valley Corridor Plan, and with various incremental steps along the way to realize this vision. We will be following the current, you know, the port project broke ground in August. They're expected to take 2 years for stabilization, and then we would be on the heels of that stabilization for our construction work. So we're looking at another 2 years of construction, completing the park in sometime in 2027. Next slide, please. And I think we're all aware of why we're doing this, because of the instability of the slope and the impact that it has on the safety of the community as well as the port shipping industry. Next slide. That supports many jobs and a lot of economic development for the city of Cleveland. So it's very important that this get stabilized and secured. And what's unique about this project is we're leveraging that infrastructure investment to bring new amenities and open space to the city. So I think this is a great public-private partnership opportunity here that is, we're basically like sitting the park on top of the work that the port is doing. Next slide. And not only that, it allows us to increase Cleveland's parkland area. This is the Trust for Public Lands park score for Cleveland that uses only 6% of its land for parks and recreation. The national median is 15%, so we're well below that. So this gives us an opportunity to increase those numbers. Next slide. It also will be an important node along this larger trail network that's been happening, you know, for the last decade. And it is fantastic to see these communities who have been isolated from open space have opportunities to connect on the new Lake Link Trail. And this park will be, you know, a 5-minute bike ride or 10-minute walk from their home. Next slide. We're also thinking about Cleveland's climate action plan from 2018 and looked at the canopy cover goal for this particular district that's in the center. It's outlined there on the screen for you. You can see that we're only meeting 48, we're halfway to our goal of 48% canopy cover for the district. So I think that thinking about how we design the streets that border the park, thinking about the reforestation of the park, thinking about reducing urban heat island effect, how trees can support some of these peak storm events that were happening and mitigate some flooding. All those things will be incorporated, will be benefit on this equity and climate plan. Next slide, please. And this also meets the 2020 citywide plan. I checked on these sort of policies that were approved in that and how we're meeting those within the park's design and goals. Next slide, please. And this just shows the city is well aware of that deficit and is building opportunities. This is one of to increase the amount of parkland within the city. Next slide, please. And out of this community effort, we've come up with these kind of guiding principles that have helped us to lead the design and make decisions along the way. And just highlight them here quickly. There's equitable access and the coexistence between public open space and an active, thriving industry. I think this is such an amazing landscape that had previously had not been accessible to the average people, only from a distance. And now you can actually come along the Lake Link Trail. You can see slag heaps and work happening, as well as natural areas being restored. I mean, it's a really dynamic and beautiful landscape that we're excited to be a part of. Also, building on the cleaning of the river and the goals of resiliency and sustainability will be incorporated into the park design, and then celebrating the culture and history of this site. I mean, I think many people don't know how rich and dense and developed this area was prior to the 1960s urban renewal work that was done in the neighborhood. Next slide, please. And the Tiger Trail work, this is kind of the missing link of that whole network that's really connecting the west side to the river and the lake, which is super exciting. So this gives us a great opportunity to continue that, and as well as thinking about how do you access the park. I mean, I know there's been some comments about parking and things, but we really do think of this as a place that's a node along a bigger network of open spaces, and a thoughtfully designed open space network like the city has been actively doing for the last 2 decades really lets you come into this park from a lot of different ways. So you might come in your neighborhood along one of these bike trails or hiking along here. You might park at one of these other nodes and come into the site through this network. This is what's so great about it. It allows all these points of access that we think is really important. Next slide. And then that network will connect you to the Cuyahoga National Park. I mean, it's just a fantastic opportunity to connect downtown Cleveland and this rich industrial history and the neighborhoods and communities that are living here with this incredibly preserved natural open space to the south. So I think that's a really exciting component that this park also provides. Next slide, please. Again, the 2017 plan, many of the same programs that were listed in this approved plan are incorporated. We've just reconfigured them a little bit. Next slide, please. This shows you this is from the port's stabilization drawing deck. It shows the earthwork that's going to be happening on the site to stabilize the slope. So the areas highlighted in red are areas that will be cutting earth back, and the areas shown in green are the only places where we can actually add some of that cut back to the project to help with stabilization. So we'll be stabilizing the new bulkhead at the bottom of the slope, but at the top of the slope, we have to remove some of the weight that those spoils have created that is causing the failure of the slope condition. And it's a lot of earth. It's 250,000 cubic yards, which is about 25,000 truckloads. So it's some major work happening out there. Next slide, please. This is a section showing that same relationship. So the area in red is the existing contour of the slope. That whole volume of red will be cut. And then the area in green, which you can obviously see it's not a balanced condition, is a small bit of fill that can be placed at the bottom of the slope. Next slide, please. As a result of that, we have a lot of steep conditions. So most of the site is at a 2.5 to 1% slope. And then these are the level-ish, I'm calling them areas that are left over where we can actually put program that people can do things. So most of the site is actually going to be pretty passive. It's going to provide, forest restoration, natural resources, ecological habitat, places to be and stroll for sure, but not a lot of places to do things. And so the areas that we'll mostly be talking about are these orange areas where we've incorporated program into the areas where we can have a level area. Next slide, please. And overlaid on that, the Clean Ohio Open Space Conservation Program was what enabled us to acquire many of these parcels. And this area in green shows which of those parcels were acquired with that fund. Now that fund comes with a bit of deed restrictions on how it can be used. And so that limits the amount of active programming that could be happening. So this is never going to be a sports park, for instance, because that limits what can happen here. Next slide. But it can be all these wonderful things about trails and habitat restoration, ecological programs, and bird watching. These kinds of things are all acceptable programs, passive uses within the park. And so you'll see the majority of the park is dedicated to those kinds of uses. Next slide, please. In addition to that, we have city rights of way that move through the park. They'll stay, they'll have utilities running through them. We'll have to provide access. So that's another consideration that we're making. One exception of that right-of-way change is highlighted in orange here. That shows how we're realigning Franklin Avenue with Franklin Boulevard. That's part of the stabilization work, but we have been coordinating with that team. And in fact, we're on that team. We won't be talking too much about the rights-of-way, as Joel mentioned, but it will allow us to have a little bit more space for the park on that parcel to the north. Next slide, please. There's also this rich history of these remnants on the site that we're hoping to reveal and incorporate into the park. There's the Cleveland-Mahoning Railroad tunnels. I mean, this is a remarkable moment where the towpath trail becomes obsolete when the first rail line comes into Cleveland, bringing coal from the Mahoning Valley. That's at the north end of our park. There's also these coal dock remnants that were used when the trains would come in to take coal on and off of barges onto train carts. Those pieces will be incorporated in the park. And then the whole Irishtown Bend Archaeological District, which was registered as a National Heritage Site through the National Park Service Department of Interior in, I think, 1990. And we're already, as part of the port's work, they've been doing some archaeological digs. We found some interesting things like this cistern in the bottom of the image there. So we're hoping to have opportunities to tell those stories on the site. Next slide, please. These are just some precedents of archaeological parks in other areas, depending on what we find and how we can incorporate them into the design. Next, please. And as Joel mentioned, we started a community engagement process for this back in 2016 and got a lot of feedback from neighbors about what are the most outstanding features, where there was room for improvement, what kinds of programs and activities, look and feel, character. It was really helpful, and we've used that as the foundation for the design moving forward. Next. And in addition to that, there's a group called the Committee of Champions that's made out of neighborhood residents that have been giving us feedback on what's working and what's not working. They've been doing tours of the neighborhood and other parks and giving us feedback on what they'd like to see here, which has been invaluable. Next slide. Some of the things that we've learned from them are about multi-generational programming. I think there's an inclusive process so that the residents stay involved, not only in the design process, but also in the construction, the maintenance, and the programming of it. So that's pretty exciting opportunity to really bring the community together around this new open space. Next slide, please. And out of that, I mean, they confirmed the kind of programs that they want here. So we learned, connecting cycles and biking and pedestrian paths were really important. Multi-seasonal programs and activities that happen throughout the year, ecological restoration, opportunities for gathering, flexible open space that could be picnicking or movie night or concerts, environment and kind of a adventure play, natural playscape. And then adult fitness was another program that came up, and then universal access to everything, thinking that our community includes not only people, able-bodied people, but seniors right at Riverview Tower, but also wheelchairs and strollers with a steep site. We want to make sure that every pathway is accessible to everyone. Next slide, please. So this will go through the design update. Next slide. We start with these 5 gateways into the park. The east trailhead is at the top of the screen on the right. That's Columbus. And then we call the north trailhead, which is at the Detroit side. And then the 2 main entrances, those 2 points will connect to the Lake Link Trail. And then upslope along West 25th Street, we have a Detroit gateway at the corner of the Veterans Memorial Bridge, and then at the new lined Franklin Avenue gateway. And then also an opportunity to connect through Ohio City Farm. Next, please. Layered on that is a series of programs based on those conditions we talked about early. The area in olive green is this mostly sort of hiking, running, biking, forest restoration areas. And then we have a large lawn. We have, we're calling the Maritime Theater, is a great place to see the view of the city and watch the ships go by, a river walk along the edge. And then the main program piece, the most actively programmed piece, is at the neighborhood edge at the top of the slope in West 25th Street that we're calling the Hilltop Park. Next slide. And within all of these are these fantastic, kind of hinted on some of these stories, but really doing a lot of research on what happened here. And, for instance, Margaret Bourke White took her famous photo of the Cleveland skyline in the 1920s at the corner right here, which was once Conn Court. So how do we share those stories with people and incorporate those ideas into the park? We're thinking about that. There's a moment on Church Avenue where you get this lovely view of St. John's Episcopal Church, and how many people know that history and its connection to freedom seekers. So there's an opportunity to tell that story. An adventure play area that might recall some of the indigenous cultures that lived on this river previously, thinking about ecology and industry coexisting along the river's edge. So different stories that we'll incorporate into the design. Also opportunities for public art and other kinds of interpretation. We're collaborating with an interpretive plan for the park too that will help to sort of weave these into clear narratives. Next slide, please. So here is our updated plan. I think, as I mentioned, there's the main changes from 2017, I think, are that the upper park has gotten narrower because of the slope, the amount of cut that was determined. So the ribbon of active programming along West 25th Street is narrower than the 2017 plan. We've shifted, once we cleared the site and we're able to really understand where the views are, we have sort of relocated the Maritime Theater so it optimizes that view of the skyline. We have used historic Sanborn maps and the archaeological work that's been done to date on the district to align a series of trails that trace the historic streets that moved through here, and looking at ways to interpret the density and pattern of this neighborhood that previously was here. And then working with the port and the Cleveland Metro Parks on the sort of Lake Link Trail ribbon that will connect along the river's edge. That will be the first open space portion that will be built after stabilization. And that will connect not only to the existing Lake Link Trail, but looking at connections to the Red Line Greenway as well. Next slide, please. This is a section, kind of the red dashed line is that existing kind of earthwork that's happening, and that how we're cutting away from that, and that there will be, you know, the new, a more complete street as part of West 25th Street. Moving down slope, there will be a 15-foot minimum multi-use trail that will take you from West 25th Street down to the Lake Link Trail. More sloped meadow, and then we have this event lawn that's happening, a flexible sort of event space, and then another 15-foot multi-use trail that will trace what is currently Riverbed Road, and then another drop down to the river's edge where we have this esplanade that ranges in width from 17 to 30 feet along that river's edge. So it's a really unique opportunity to get close to the river, which we obviously can't do now. Next slide, please. So there's a plan again. We have some enlargements, and I'll kind of go through each of these zones because it's you know, it's a big site with lots in it. So next slide, please. This is looking at how the Lake Link Trail will connect. I just broke out this circulation separately because it's complex and easier to digest in different layers. So we start by connecting the Lake Link Trail. And as I mentioned, this will be the first project that gets built after stabilization by the Cleveland Metro Parks. And what's unique about it is not only does it connect to the north and south ends of the trail, but it also, it separates at the river walk. We worked really carefully with the grading and stabilization team to separate both vertically and horizontally the bike circulation from the pedestrians. So the pedestrians will be right at the river's edge, and the bikes will be along the river, but upslope a little bit, which I'll show you in a minute. Next slide. Then another key piece is bringing bikes and pedestrians down from West 25th Street. So because of that steep slope, it's a long, you know, diagonal loop that takes you from the corner and down and connects you right into the Lake Link Trail. We're also adding cycle tracks to both the Franklin, or we will be as part of those designs in the right of way, to Franklin Avenue as well as to West 25th Street. Next slide. We're also working with the county to think about the potential for a undercarriage connection. I know there's been some studies and ideas around that. So we wanted to design the West 25th Street Plaza in such a way that allowed for that connection. So we've been working closely with that team. Next slide. And then also Riverview Tower and the farm, making connections through that for residents and visitors and workers on the farm to get to the park. Next slide. As I mentioned, this is Riverbed Street, which will also be a multi-use trail through the park. Next slide. And then the connection to Red Line Greenway. Next slide. And then vertical connections, more direct for able-bodied people with stair routes. So these are all stairs that would take you down, directly down to the trails if you were walking along these edges. Next slide. And then also thinking about parking. I mean, I mentioned the slope constraints of the site, you know, those very few level areas that we have for parking. We're not putting parking in the park boundary. We're using those areas for active programming. But there is a lot of parking around. And so we're looking to connect, for instance, at Merwin's across the river. There's over 100 stalls there. It's a 5-minute walk over the Columbus Bridge to get to the trailhead. If you go upslope at the West Side Market, there's over 500 parking spaces there. We're adding a new stair shown here in red that would take you as a 5-minute walk from that parking lot down to the park. Also, as we work with as 25th connects and the Franklin Avenue Boulevard redesign, we'll be incorporating street parking where it makes sense in those spaces as well. Next slide. So this will be a zoom in at the Hilltop Park to talk about some of the programs that will abut West 25th Street. We'll start on the left of the screen, which is at the intersection of Detroit. And this is really kind of a welcome plaza where we would commemorate that Margaret Bourke White photo. There's an opportunity to put in a new welcome center and cafe here that will have public restrooms and concessions. That memorial concept that I mentioned is opposite Church Avenue. and some ideas about a potentially maybe a diaspora garden that talks about the plants and seed that freedom seekers brought north and from Africa, as well as the quilting patterns of the crossroads, which signified Cleveland and the hopeful end of their journey. So that's an opportunity there. As we move down, there's opportunities for family picnicking, play, adult fitness. The Welcome Center will be used as it is now for gathering and exhibits and a cultural center. And then thinking about the frontage along Riverview as more of a big front porch for residents, so that they're more engaged and out into the onto the public street. Next slide, please.
Shit.
This is a zoom in of the intersection of Franklin Avenue and West 25th Street. This is the 1 acre playground that I mentioned that's built into the slope. You can see the sort of existing right-of-way dashed in to the left of the screen. That's the current alignment. And as we mentioned, we're going to be realigning it with Franklin Boulevard to the west. This allows us to have that space, which is currently part of the farm. It will become the this nature play space, as well as a family picnic gathering. Next slide. On the other end, this is at the Detroit side. You get a sense of the entry plaza, the location of the cafe and outdoor dining, the slope down to the Great Lawn, and then the healing garden wetland that we'll talk about here in a minute. So that's some of the streetscape improvements that will be happening along West 25th Street. We're showing the existing curb line in red as a point of reference to show that we're shrinking the vehicle space within the roadway to accommodate some of the other amenities that the park will offer. Next slide, please. And this is just a key plan to the views. I will walk you from Franklin Avenue to Detroit. We'll look at 6 views and talk a little bit about the park experience that way. Next slide, please. So after front steps came down, you get this spectacular skyline view. This is at the location where the playground will be. So next slide shows how that playground will be nestled in that and framing those views with new trees for shade. The playground are a series of little play rooms that are along a 4.9% slope meandering walk that takes you down to Belvedere overlooking the park and the city. Next slide. Here you see that Belvedere, and you also see how we're incorporating bouldering and climbing and slides into the topography. So the playground is very vertical in how it's conceived. Next slide, please. From here, we're back up on West 25th Street, the existing conditions. Next slide. And how the new family picnic area will fit into that. On the left of the screen, you can see how the sidewalk and the 2-way cycle track are fit into the right-of-way there, as a tree-lined urban experience. Next slide, please. Moving farther to the north, there's that same condition with a double cycle, with a 2-way cycle track, 10-foot sidewalk. And then you can also see the multi-use trail down, kind of starting to slope down into the park. Next slide. This just kind of maps out some of those dimensions for reference. Next slide. Now we're farther to the north where Concourt used to be, and looking towards that Margaret Bourke-White photograph view. It's framed here with this new cafe building. Again, this is a placeholder. We worked to site this with the park design and the grading, but there will be a separate architecture team that will design this, and we'll be working closely with them and bring that back to you as a separate review process. But this is more of a sort of a master planning level for how the building would fit on the site. Next slide, please. Down slope from that, so this is the backside of that building, and so we're imagining that we can take advantage of the slope here by making the building, a single story from West 25th Street and a double story from the park side. And in that lower story, we can incorporate maybe a concession stand. There's public restrooms in there, and there's also these terraces both at the plaza level and on the roof that offer these amazing views of the city for dining. And then a series of terraced lawns that kind of step down to the meadowed slope. Next slide, please. And then the moving downslope to that sort of flatter area or plateau at the base of the hill is where we're incorporating some of the programs that I mentioned earlier, the Maritime Theater, the Great Lawn, and the Wetland Healing Garden. I'll show you some of those images here. Next slide. This is an enlargement of that plan. So you can see the cafe in the lower left of the screen, the playground on the lower right. So we're moving down that 2.5% slope. And then we have a level plateau. And on that, we have this 1 acre, we're calling it 1 acre Great Lawn that also has a picnic grove adjacent to it. And then next to that is this is a wetland healing garden. We imagine we're treating all the stormwater on the site here, but we're also doing it as an ecological restoration project. So there's trails and park benches that move around it. I could imagine somebody being at Lutheran Hospital and taking a stroll down here, whether you're waiting for test results or you're visiting a loved one. There's a place to sort of be immersed in nature and have some peace within the park. So it's forested around its edges. And then as you move down, there's another vertical drop from where Riverbed Trail is down to the water. And that is where we put the Maritime Theater. And so that's kind of built into that slope. It's about the scale of the Solstice Steps in Lakewood that we use that as a sort of precedent to just sort of size it. And then you can have this boulevard experience or esplanade experience along the river. Next slide. So we have a series of views moving through that. We'll start at the upper corner and make our way to the pond, look at the Great Lawn, look at the amphitheater, and then look at the Esplanade Riverwalk. Next slide, please. So here is that meandering path. There's a small pier that comes out. Again, this is stormwater treatment wetland with ecological restoration on its edges. It's surrounded in a grove of trees, places to sit, places to stroll, very passive use. Next slide. On the edge of that woodland is the Great Lawn. So this is in the picnic grove. So you see in the foreground here some picnic pods. There's opportunities for hammocks here. This could be, a place to gather with family and friends on the weekend. And then the flexible lawn, next slide, is moving north. So this is an area where on an average day, it could just be use it for flying a kite or playing with your kids, but it could also be, next slide, used as an event space. So if there was an outdoor movie or if there was an interest in having an outdoor event here, it could also host that. Next slide. Now we're at the overlook above the Maritime Theater. So you see the view that you get from here, watching the ships kind of meander that hairpin turn. And then the Esplanade or Riverwalk is at the bottom of the screen, and there are these lawn terraces that step down. Next slide. And that's the view of the separated Lake Link Trail. This is where it splits. So on the bottom, on the lower level along the river's edge is where we'll be pedestrian only. And then here at this midpoint is where there's a two-way cycle track plus pedestrian space. And then the amphitheater is up to the left. There's a crescent shape. We're calling this a kind of cultural orchard, but this is a native redbud grove that we are imagining in early spring will bring this bright arc of pink to the skyline. So if you were downtown looking back on the river, you would see this crescent shape of pink that one time of year could be a beautiful moment for the city. Next slide, please. And we've been thinking about the handrail as an opportunity to really tell some of these stories. So the bottom image is sort of a timeline of the sort of history of industrial Cleveland and early settlement. And so we were imagining that maybe that's incorporated into this lean rail so that you can come along this edge and have a really rich texture, and interesting stories could be told as you walk along the river. Next slide, please. And then this is a bird's eye view. Now we're kind of floating over the river. The bulkhead is in the foreground there that the stabilization team is incorporating a green bulkhead concept where they're between the piles, which you see as steel here, are these wooden cages that support woody debris for fish larvae, as well as planting that would spill over them. So that'll be part of that edge. And then we cantilever over that with our esplanade. That's the interpretive rail. And then as you step up, you get the pedestrian only zone, and then some bleacher seating, and then the bike zone, and then the amphitheater. Next slide, please. And now we're on that circulation system is a little more clear here. We're looking south towards the Columbus Lift Bridge, tucked into this. So the bike facility is on the right, as you can see where the cyclists are. Then it's, like I said, it's grade and planted, separated from the pedestrian spaces. And along the esplanade, we have these moments of seating. This is a bar counter where people could come and have their lunch and look at the river. And then you step down again to the esplanade for the passage. Next slide, please. This gives some of those critical dimensions for reference. Next slide. And now another series of views that will take you down along the sort of, we're on the riverbed, old Riverbed Road trail. So there's three more views and then we're done. Next slide. This is at where the current trailhead this is where the Lake Link Trail sort of ends right now, right? Looking at Hooples, looking at where Columbus in the foreground, Franklin Avenue coming down. Next slide. And then an enlargement plan of that, we're doing some changes here where the Lake Link Trail will actually get reconfigured on that other side of Columbus along Carter so that we can cross more safely towards the intersection, right at the intersection of Franklin. So you would come up, cross there to connect. There's some studies that the city's doing for this intersection that we're collaborating with them. It gets rid of that sort of pork chop free right turn off of Carter to make it safer. There's another study that's being done to look at a boardwalk on the opposite side of Columbus. And so we've been exploring ways that you might be able to connect under the Columbus Avenue lift bridge. There's a space there to a boardwalk that would take you to our Riverwalk. And those would be tied to maybe a future phase of work that happens with that project. We have the RTA viaduct overhead that's represented here with this white dashed line, just to give you sort of sense. It's very dynamic space with overhead spaces in the river. It could be really, really stunning place to be. Next slide. I think it's easier to tell these in the images. So here's a view coming down Franklin Avenue. It currently exists when they were restoring the bridge. Next slide. And so there's a grade change, we're trying to incorporate program into these grade changes. So here there's a drop. So we're like, let's put some slides down. They go through those archways into the bridge. There's passage on your right, and then you connect to the trailhead here. So it's just a playful way of kind of activating some of these slopes. Next slide. This is the Irishtown Cultural Heritage Site, as you know, historic image from the 1880s. We have information from these Sanborn maps on who lived here and how they lived, and so it's super interesting stories to tell. And we were trying to figure out a way to how to commemorate this special place. Next slide. We learned from the archaeologist on site that the Sanborn maps are quite accurate to scale, and they've started to find structures and cisterns and privies and coal cellars in the remains of this area. So this is super exciting. Next slide shows some of those findings from this summer's work. And then the next slide shows you how we think we might incorporate those into an area. So some precedent images about places that are commemorating historic footprints or passageways or remnants of a previous time. Next slide, please. So in this view, we're looking at where we can. The idea is that it's because the slope is so radically changed from its historic condition. A lot of the foundations upslope are really deep under the fill, but when you get closer to the river, they're a little bit more shallow because there's less fill placed there, so we can actually get at them more clearly. So we're thinking there's a section that might have these walls that delineate the footprints of the historic homes, and then they would feature, like in this case, that's the cistern that we discovered. So there would be these moments where you could sort of reveal some of the things that we found in those sites, and then you would take this kind of boardwalk over them, and then the whole district to kind of get a sense of the scale and the density of this, and also to bring it to the human level. We had this idea of doorways, and so thinking we have the Sanborn maps that shows where the front and back doors were to all these properties, and so the thought was that there could be this just grid of doors that are sort of the size of a body, familiar, and then we would reforest this area. So at the same time that we're looking to the past, we're also thinking of the future and thinking about reforesting the site, bringing the forest city back to Cleveland. So this is kind of the beginnings of a concept for a memorial to the Irishtown Heritage Site. Next slide, please. And then as we move to the north, we call this kind of the North Trailhead. This is Detroit Superior Bridge above us, and then Detroit Avenue up on the top of that. This is that Cuyahoga-Mahoning rail tunnel that I mentioned. And this will be where we connect to the existing northbound portion of the Lake Link Trail. Next slide. And with through the community engagement work, said this could be a place that's very flexible with lots of opportunities for programming. So this could be a place where could have a half court of basketball, where you could have a beer garden set up on weekends. You could have adult fitness like a yoga program. So building a space that maximizes the flexibility for programming has been the sort of guide to this design. Next slide. And so this is an enlargement plan that shows you how the Lake Link Trail will pass right through this space. There's an opportunity for bleacher seating tucked into that slope wall as it's coming in, opportunity to activate the tunnels, like with concessions or temporary programmings, just to really reveal those beautiful stone archways, which I think is the oldest existing bridge in Cleveland. And then there's the coal dock remnants along the water. So just all these pieces of historic eminence are kind of pulled together through the trail network to really reveal those stories. Next slide, please. And finally, a view looking under that bridge, activated tunnel, half basketball court, bleacher seating, and then the path trail, Lake Link Trail passing through. Next slide. And that is comes to the conclusion of our presentation, and I have the plan here for reference to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
I believe we have some public feedback. Nate, was this on co-urbanize, and do you have anything from there?
Hi, everybody. There's been no new, I don't think, co-urbanize comments posted since this update. It did go out on co-urbanize, and I believe that's why there are some letters of public comment that Jessica can read. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We did get 9 comments, emails regarding this project before our deadline on Tuesday, and those were sent out to committee members Tuesday afternoon. The comments included concern for the parking at the Columbus and Franklin area, impact to local establishments like Hooples, and just general parking for the park for guests and locals, to not take away existing parking that's available around the area, and the playground location at the bottom of the hill over by the Columbus Road, and safety for pedestrians in there, and then a comment regarding finishing the Red Line Greenway for equitable access.
I guess we will then open it up for comment from the committee.
Hi, I have to sign off very shortly for a meeting, but I just did want to say that I think this work has been absolutely amazing. I love the design of each of these kind of rooms or spaces or nodes on the path. You guys have, I'm not sure if you have the construction fencing up yet, but I'm wondering if it's in the works to just put renderings or put images of the neighborhood people on the construction fences to, you know, kind of really liven up the neighborhood and increase excitement. I mean, I could see it going all down 25th or whatever, however many yards of fencing that you have would be my one recommendation. And I am really excited about those slides at the end. We're actually working on a project and might need your input a little bit on if you can get those working, because we're currently trying to do something like that with Woodhill. So yeah, I might be reaching out, but I think this is absolutely wonderful.
Thank you, Philip.
This is Greg Peckham at Land Studio. Just a quick response to that, to let folks know that we are working on the construction fencing that will not only tell about the park, but also about the port stabilization process. So that should be coming in the next few weeks.
I just wanted to echo Philip's sentiment. I think this is fantastic. I think every component from the top to bottom is well thought out, and it's scaled such that it's going to really be a boon for Cleveland and just the region. The one area that I think could be celebrated a bit more is the north corner where it connects to the trail. I think it feels a little bit underwhelming, the way that it's just it feels like it's just was a resultant of the space. It feels as if it could be, whether it's you could fit a whole court basketball court so that it could be better or more programmed. It feels as if the trail cutting right through the middle of it limits the amount of programming it could actually provide. Its proximity to Lakeview, I could see that as having, use almost 7 days a week by the residents there. I think they have an outdoor full court basketball court, so I envision that as likely being used by them. So to me, if putting it as a half court basketball court feels like a half measure.
Yeah.
So
I wish we could fit a full one, and we can't fit a full one in there, but I appreciate the feedback, and we can certainly cook it some more.
Yeah, so it just seems as if if there's a way to celebrate that a little bit more, so that even the bleachers feel a little more justified, as a component of the collective kind of group or festive program there, that it seems like that's searching for it. It would make more sense there, but it does seem right that that's a kind of a food truck like park there.
Thank you for that. That's helpful.
I agree with both sentiments that have been said. This is really fantastic, and I really think even down to the details, the consideration for the history of the site is really evident, and it's well designed. Given the public comment, I would urge a consideration for parking and how that will affect the businesses in the area. But beyond that, I think this is great.
Thank you, Mara. Yes, we are very aware of that. I think that the parking is a concern, and we are hoping that this will help Hoople's business. I mean, that's how I see it. But yeah, it's tricky. It's hard to, we certainly can't add parking to the park, but I think working with our partners and around the perimeter to try to come up with innovative ways to maximize the parking here, I think is critical.
And I think, hi, Ben Jimbo from Ohio City Incorporated. So we've actually been working on a public parking solution with Lutheran Hospital actually for the last couple of years. The Lutheran Hospital is a Cleveland Clinic hospital. They actually already opened their rather spacious 500 space parking lot, when they're not using it for their employees, which is 9 to 5. We see those as peak hours for the park use, like their off times would actually be able to very easily serve the park. They've been very open to opening that for, either special events or for maybe even a paid parking solution here when they are not using that space. So that's a 500 space parking lot located directly adjacent to the park. As Scott talked about, that we're also looking at any other already existing lots. And I think part of those solutions are also, communicating where those lots and spaces are available and how to connect them. And that probably, it's how our website interfaces for the park, et cetera, as it gets built, and how to access that parking that already exists.
So to clarify, there's either a planned or an existing integration of either a digital app for parking and directional wayfinding for district-wide?
Well, no, I would say as the park comes online, we'll have a website for the park, et cetera. So pointing those out like an easy to understand manners for existing public parking. At the West Side Market, there are a number of paid lots surrounding that are frequently not completely occupied, but they're not particularly well integrated into any way that visitors to the district can easily access them.
Right.
So I think it's wayfinding, it's website, it's a combination of things.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any other comments from committee members? Not seeing any. Do you believe you have enough feedback to move forward for concept review with landmarks and planning?
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Very helpful.
Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, we'll reach out with notes and more info about future meeting. But yeah, thanks again. And that was our last item on our agenda. So thank you for all the presenters and everyone that joined us. For the committee members, We have, hopefully you're able to come and join us for our landmarks happy hour. That's tomorrow evening. If it's on your calendars at Goldhorn Brewery. We have invited all of the members of our landmarks committees to come and join, since we've only been virtual for a few years. So some people haven't seen everybody for a while. Hold on one. Sorry. So yes. Yeah, that's what we have for staff.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
Have a
thanks,
great day.
everybody.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Scott.